Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. Today begins the first of 3 race weeks in a row. The Spanish Grand Prix, the British Grand Prix, and of course the Austrian Grand Prix after that. Big rounds of upgrades were expected over the course of these 3 races. Ferrari had a shocking time in Montreal. They're bringing major change this weekend, as are expected to be Mercedes. McLaren have some small developments from now to the rest of the season. Red Bull will try and stay ahead on a circuit which certainly suits them, but big questions have been raised right now. Who are exactly the favourites for the Constructors' Championship? Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Ferrari won Le Mans yesterday, back to back, for the first time in I think, well, basically 100 years that a team has won both the Monaco Grand Prix and the 24 Hours of Le Mans in the same, effectively, season, which is unbelievable scenes. It was quite the race. There was so much happening. There were so much controversy, penalties, drama, the rain at the ends, meaning that Ferrari could make it on fuel. The obviously the 2 different driver pairings, like Fuoco was an absolute monster, I'm not gonna lie, during some of the stints here, and yeah, since 1934 was the first time. So Ferrari have gone back to back winning Le Mans. Gotta be said, they returned to Le Mans last year, they won it, they've gone there this year, and okay, maybe you could argue that it deserved to win or whatever, but they won it again, back to back in the hypercar category. So incredible stuff what Ferrari are accomplishing at the moment. Yes, from an operational standpoint, Ferrari in the WEC this season have had their fair share of cock-ups, you know, to say the very least, and that's not necessarily going away, but Ferrari as an entire outfit seem just way more competent now than they did before, and obviously the World Endurance Championship is a very different thing to Formula 1, but it's still racing at the very highest level, and Ferrari are doing a rather good job of that now. So I think it shows that, you know, the way that Ferrari are trending, not just Fred Vasseur and the F1 team, but also John Elkann and just the general decision-making at Ferrari is definitely moving in the right direction right now. We'll get more back to, in a second, to the upgrades they are planning to bring. Barcelona, we're going to this weekend, it has typically been the testing circuit, right, for several years in Formula 1. It's kind of why it's considered to be such a boring track as well, is because every team has decades, basically, of data at the circuit. And sure, the circuit now is slightly different. The final corner is actually good now, rather than that horrible chicane they put in several years ago. And as a result, the teams want to go back to Barcelona again. Well, some of them do. Some of them don't. Apparently 7 out of 10 still want to remain in Bahrain, despite the fact that next year, Bahrain, the Grand Prix in Bahrain, does not actually start off the season. It's, I think, maybe the third race, or at least the second race, and maybe it's third, actually, because I think it goes Melbourne, at least to start out the year. Definitely that is confirmed next season. It's actually the 4th race of next year behind Melbourne, then China, Japan, and then Bahrain. But still the teams apparently want to do testing in Bahrain. So, yeah, I guess you can speculate as to why, despite higher costs of that being the case, it might make more sense to do it in Barcelona as they might have traditionally done. Let's talk about some disaster classes, though, from Alpine, because what a team these guys are. And if you guys didn't watch the Le Mans, their entry into Le Mans, they both DNF'd after putting effectively modified Mechachrome F2 engines in the car that both blew up within a quarter of the race. And nobody was surprised, but apparently the Alpine mechanics that thought it was going to work. Absolute shambles there. And talking of engines, they've apparently been considering, and this was rumoured actually a few weeks ago now, but now it is maybe going to be basically verified to be true in the near future, on abandoning making engines for 2026. As it stands, it's going to be Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull powertrains, Honda, Audi, and Renault, or Alpine, as the 6 teams that are going to be making engines. But apparently Alpine, its engine right now isn't very good. They keep saying that their engine is so down on horsepower compared to, you know, the other ones on the grid. Their car is bad as well, so it's a disaster class really from top to bottom. They are apparently considering just calling it a day on the engine project and basically saying, you know what, we're not doing a very good job with the engine now, we're probably not going into in 2026 either, nobody's buying our engines from us anyway, so what's even the point? So Renault Alpine may become a customer team in 2026, which would be, well, it would be completely against the whole intention of these guys to win races in 100 races, or, you know, the 100 race plan, or whatever they've been cooking up with over the last several years that obviously has failed miserably. That is one option. The other option, I suppose, is just to leave the sports. You know, that's been the talk, right? Maybe it's worth Alpine just saying, right, our engines are bad, our team is bad, maybe let's just sell. Like, it's a plausible possibility that they could consider that, but it's just the franchise spot is so valuable as effectively a franchise now that I kind of doubt they'll consider doing so, but they may become a customer team. The actual rumour in the article suggested that the most likely team for them to buy from might well be Red Bull, so, you know, Alpine could be a Red Bull powertrains powered car in 2026, which would be quite the role reversal after the Red Bull Renault days, that maybe it now might be Alpine Red Bull powertrains as their team, that if that happens, I can't imagine I'm expecting all that much. Quickly on the driver market of Alpine, Bottas is considered to be a contender. Effectively, I think what's going to happen here is that Audi right now is going to be Nico Hülkenberg +1. We don't know who that +1's going to be. It could be Bottas, it could be Sainz, it could potentially still be Zhou, although I don't think that would be deserved, but, you know, he brings a lot of money in. It is what it is. That's how things can go sometimes. If Sainz goes to Williams, though, then Bottas can't go to Williams, so, you know, that leaves the Bottas option as Audi, or maybe Alpine. I mean, he is a contender for that seat. Bottas is a driver that is not going to be causing massive drama, right? That is the thing that Alpine are looking for with their driver lineup. They've even said they don't even care that much about speed, which is probably not the thing to say, but whatever. They basically said Ocon was fast, but a nightmare. So what we want is somebody fast, sure, obviously we want you to be fast, but the priority is being professional, and apparently Ocon isn't professional, so they've got rid of him, basically. So that is at least a possibility. Logan Sargent's going to be gone. I mean, like, there's just no doubt in my mind about that. Running out of options. I mean, yeah, his options, IndyCar, Formula E, and potentially other things like that. The future of the Red Bull program has been causing some discussion as well. So Isaac Hadjar currently is second in the championship in Formula 2. He's been doing a good job now for the last couple of seasons, and seems like he might be the one they're looking for. Red Bull have had so many juniors over the last several days. Vips, of course, caused a bit of controversy. Hadjar's there, Ayumu Iwasa, like several juniors. Zane Maloney, I think, is in the Red Bull program. So there's a few options. They've actually dropped one of their guys as well from his junior contract, and he will continue the remainder of his season, but he's no longer going to be a Red Bull junior. So I think the feeling is at Red Bull, they are trying to cut down the number of juniors that they've been supporting over the last several years. The intention has been to find the next Max. That's a difficult challenge, and they've supported so many drivers in so many categories that it's probably not been quite worth their while. So they're going to, well, cut down basically the amount of drivers they actually support here. Ollie Behrman, Ferrari Driver Academy member, he will be going to Haas, we're pretty sure. 6 FP1 sessions this season, Behrman's going to drive. This is going to be the second one of the season here in Barcelona, and according to Haas, the Brit is seriously in the frame. I mean, it's very obvious, I think, that he's going to get that deal. The question really is who's alongside him. Is it going to be Magnussen? Is it going to be somebody else? There was even a brief period where it could have potentially been Tsunoda, but that's not going to be happening. The most likely Behrman partner right now is probably Ocon, which, yeah, that could potentially be kind of fireworks, because Behrman has a pretty uncompromising driving style as well, especially if you're watching his overtakes back in Jeddah in the Ferrari. You know, he goes for a move, and Ocon also likes to go for a move, certainly on his teammates. Let's talk about some of the development war, though, going into Spain, because this is the big talking point, whether anyone's going to be at a top Red Bull. Going into Monaco, Red Bull said, we're going to struggle here, and they did. Going into Montreal, they said, we're probably not going to be the fastest car here, and, okay, tough to argue, but Perez was nowhere. Verstappen won the Grand Prix, but he wasn't on pole, technically, just about. He had the pole time, but it wasn't enough because he set it slightly later than Russell did. Barcelona, though, Red Bull are very confident, right? They're going to be back to business. And even Helmut Marko, I think, said a couple of races ago, they shall see in Barcelona whether they actually have any problems or whether it's merely a characteristic of those tracks that is making the opposition look closer to them than they actually are. My expectation is Red Bull are going to come in and dominate Spain. That's what Leclerc expects as well. If that's not the case, then the championship is still possible. Maybe not the drivers anymore, but the constructors is, even if Red Bull do dominate Spain, potentially very much still alive. So Ferrari, they've got a big upgrade package on the works. They're talking about a big step forward. Ferrari, the way they're bringing their upgrades is in substantial packages. Like, they brought one to Imola, they're going to bring another one to Spain, and the plan is that every time they bring an upgrade, it's a substantial step forward on where they were previously. They're probably going to need it, let's be real, because the other teams are improving. Yes, they were fastest in Monaco and they won, but Monaco's always a pretty unique circuit, and actually they were quite surprised their car performed so well there, because it's not necessarily so good in the slower speed corners. McLaren have also had a slower speed corner weakness, but their upgrades they brought a few rounds ago, certainly from Miami and beyond, they actually really worked, even to affect the slow speed performance in a positive way that they were not expecting. So Ferrari have a big upgrade package on the works. Speaking of McLaren as well, they've got a slightly different, more Mercedes-style approach, where it's not about bringing major packages, it's rather small and continuous steps. So McLaren will probably have another couple of pieces. You will find these European races, Spain, Silverstone, Austria, we've got back-to-back-to-back weekends of Formula 1 over the next few weekends. There will be serious developments that are arriving to the cars. How extreme they are, that remains to be seen. McLaren are going for what they believe is like a step-by-step continuous approach, as is the case for Mercedes. They confirmed several rounds ago they have upgrades every single round, and it's not clear to what extent these upgrades are going to arrive here in Spain or exactly what they're going to change on the car. But every weekend they've said, yeah, we've got something new, we've got something new. It seems like the cost cap is not on the top of mind right now for Mercedes, who believe they can bring a lot of changes. Like their front wing was the key one. There's even been talk in recent weeks that Red Bull aren't so happy with the legality, shall we say, of the Mercedes front wing. But it does seem to be legal based on the technical definition, and I don't think the FIA are going to change their mind on that. So it opens the door that, you know, the FIA are happy with this front wing from Mercedes. They can bring further upgrades that complement what they've brought to the car so far. And even McLaren are pretty convinced that Mercedes maybe have the strongest package, or one of the very strongest packages, I guess, outside of Red Bull as it stands. Because Andrea Stella said in Monaco, that basically Mercedes had pace that McLaren could match. Certainly that was the case during some parts of practice, that McLaren were looking at Mercedes on the timesheets and saying, yeah, we can't match those times. And their upgrade, especially, you know, the new front wing for Russell, was looking rather good. As things then went to Montreal, it was becoming clear that, yeah, Mercedes had like the fastest car. They put it on pole in the hands of George Russell. And then obviously Norris wins in the end over, I mean, he could have won the entire Grand Prix, but he wins over George. And as Andrea Stella says, Mercedes should have finished ahead of Lando. They were a few tenths of a second faster than us. So, I mean, he's kind of roasting George Russell as well, isn't he? And he's saying, yeah, like George got beaten by this guy, despite the fact that they had substantially the faster car. And I'm not sure if looking at the race, I would be convinced that Mercedes had substantially the faster car than McLaren, because, you know, a few tenths of a second is a pretty damn large advantage. But the point is that Stella thinks that, yeah, Mercedes had the fastest car maybe in the entire field that weekend, maybe outside of the Red Bull. So, you know, you've got to think if you're on the Mercedes side and they've got more upgrades to come and they seem to understand where they're going, they could be a serious threat. And, of course, worth recognising that at this particular circuit of Spain, Mercedes have typically been very good. I mean, of course, Verstappen got his first win there in 2016 when both Mercedes P1, P2 crashed into each other out of the Grand Prix. But even in recent times, like the W13 had a stinking start to 2022, turned up to Spain, a couple of upgrades they brought to the car, but they were, I think, 3 tenths off the Red Bull that race and was good enough to be in contention with Max for the win that day. Okay, not in contention really, but Russell was holding Max back because the DRS was broken, if you guys remember correctly, on that Spanish Grand Prix a couple of years ago. And then Hamilton, after a first lap contact with Magnussen, went from P20 right to the back of the field, like a minute behind, up to P4 he got to, I think, before then he had overheating issues and he had to give Sainz the place back and drop back one position. Of course, there's also talk about what this means in the longer term. Mercedes seem to be finally understanding the ground effect stuff. Now, if they have their grips, let's say, maybe they finally do, on the ground effect era of today, it's plausible they could be in a similar position in the ground effect era of 2026. Ground effect isn't going away, generating downforce from the floor, but it is going to be substantially reduced in terms of how important it is, the way you can execute it, like how close the cars have to run to the ground. The problems that Mercedes have suffered with, the porpoising and these other things, that shouldn't really be a problem with the way the 2026 cars are designed. So if they have grips of it now, it's not unreasonable to expect they could really be grips to it in 2026, in addition to the engine stuff. And Toto's been pretty gung-ho on this. I mean, he straight up says some of our rivals could well be on the back foot with the engines. So, you know, kind of saying, yeah, we're going to be fine. We're going to have a strong power unit. The other rivals might well struggle a little bit more. And this is why people are talking about the Carlos Sainz Williams move and saying, you know what, it actually makes a fair bit of sense, because at least you know, joining Williams now, you're getting an engine which is likely to be a very competitive engine in 2026. Now, let's be real. Let's say the Mercedes engine is really good in 2026, and the engine is by far the most important thing in the entire sport. Williams are at best the third fastest team, right? Behind McLaren and Mercedes, theoretically, in that time frame. But nonetheless, it's, I suppose, better than nothing. And even there's lots of talk from Mercedes and Toto as well that they're in a very good position for 2026. How much of this is true and actually what's going on? How much of this is Toto trying to convince Max Verstappen that it's true? That is one of the other things that's worth thinking about here. But very much interested in your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Just one final thing, that depending on the AI you ask, you'll get different answers here. But this is apparently the next 10 world champions according to a certain AI algorithm, choosing loads of different names. No champion goes back to back, apparently, which I feel is rather unlikely. But anyway, Verstappen apparently is winning this year. Leclerc's winning next year. Then it has Russell and Mercedes coming out on top in 2026 after the change of regulations. Then Norris and presumably a McLaren, also Mercedes powered in 27. And then, I'm not going to lie, in this potential time frame, Verstappen probably goes to Mercedes, right? Like, if Mercedes are dominating and Mercedes power is dominating like this, and Toto Wolff wants him, you know, it's plausible that Verstappen in this hypothetical world ends up at Mercedes and then wins in 2028, then Piastri, possibly for McLaren in 2029, Russell in 2030 or whatever. So, the AI is predicting that potentially the first 5, certainly 4 of the first 5 years after the regulation changes, will be won by Mercedes power, you would theorise. Then it goes Leclerc again, then Porsche is apparently appearing here, so, that ain't happening, to be honest, but fair play if it does. And then, of course, Lando Norris in 2033, apparently. So thought it was kind of interesting. When I've seen this done elsewhere, there's maybe more truth to these things than I would like to admit, but I'm still not convinced by it. But very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.